Are you ready to spend your weekend with Friedkin?
Right, folks. Saturday night at 10 o'clock. It's the weekend at Freakin'. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second inaugural edition of Weekend at Freakin's. So, last weekend we covered like two of the best films ever made, which were Cruising and To Live and Die in L.A. And this weekend, I'm going to be covering probably one of the best films made in the history of cinema. And I'm not going to be doing it alone, though. I'm going to be doing it with one of my favorite co-hosts and one of the best fans in the world of the show. We got Phantasmatt with us tonight. How you doing, man?
Oh, man, I'm so humbled by that. Thank you.
Yeah, man. So these are always fun.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on. I think, this is one of the biggest, next to The Exorcist, of course, one of the biggest titles that you could be covering on a show like this. And surprisingly, a movie that a lot of people haven't seen or ever heard of, I don't think.
Well, I was thinking about this, and I'm like, I'm just going to go ahead and say that we're not going to have a big crowd for this movie, for this particular show, because like even hardcore, movie fans and don't really reference this movie anymore, and I don't know why that is. I think it just kind of it slid under the radar, and to be honest with you, like I was looking at a list of famous directors that the Mahoning was plugging in to do these specialty shows with, right? And they've got your Hitchcock and your Argento and your goes down the line of all these directors, but no Friedkin. So I don't really even feel like Friedkin gets the kind of recognition that he deserves.
No,
really?
Everybody, The Exorcist is such a monolith, I guess, of a movie, but it's people that don't really know or care to know much about horror beyond the title of the movie. William Friedkin isn't a name that people, throw out there a lot. Everybody knows The Exorcist, but I don't think people really delve into his filmography past that a lot of times, which is a shame because, this movie from the start of its release was swept under the rug and has continued to be that way till this day. And that is the crime of the century. This is one of the greatest movies that William Friedkin ever directed. And it's one of the greatest movies in this style of suspense thriller that you could ever ask for, in my opinion.
I think it's I'll put it this way. I think the last hour of this movie is probably maybe like in the top 5 hours of a film. You know what I mean? Like if you took 1 hour out of a film, the ending of this movie is probably in the top 5 that I've ever seen. And that's what makes it so fucking crazy to me that nobody really ever talks about this movie.
No, the last hour of the movie too, it flies by. I mean, because there's not a dull moment whatsoever. Once they get into that truck, it is nonstop from that point on, and that last hour really flies by. And the first hour, it doesn't necessarily drag. I mean, I get that they had to build the characters a little bit and all of that, but the last hour is, I think, one of the most fun movie experiences that you could have. I mean, this is like the perfect movie to watch with one or two other people and just kind of bathe in all that suspense because it's really effective. It is genuinely effective. And
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say, like, for me personally, I hadn't seen the movie until a year or two ago, um, and I was just from the first watch. It became one of the greatest, highest ratings that I could give for a movie. So I think a lot of people are missing out. So if you haven't seen it right off the bat, I'm going to tell you: find the Blu-ray, watch it, buy it. It definitely needs a new release. I think it deserves a 4K, but I think there's a pretty decent Blu-ray out there. I don't own it, but that may soon change.
I don't either. I think I'm going to get this along with. I've got to live and die in LA, but I don't have cruising, so I think I'm going to pick this one up in cruising like in the next week or so.
Mhm.
But so yeah, here's really the way that I feel about this movie too. Like, and I said this last week on the show at some point. Like, I really don't give a shit like how many people, like this particular series of shows or even tune in to watch this particular series of shows, because if just one person actually like listens to this and goes and sees Sorcerer or To Live and Die in LA or something like that, one of those movies, it's all completely worth it. Because I mean, it's I don't know how to explain how good these movies are, but they're not movies they're not like comic book movies. Like, you don't just watch them and then immediately forget about them. Like, the shit stays with you for days, if not weeks.
It really does. Yeah, this one does. Cruising was the same way for me. The Exorcist is the same way. To Live and Die in LA, that's the same way.
Yeah. The ending of To Live and Die in LA, where I was just like, they just never make movies like this. Like, they would never. They didn't even make movies like that back then, but they damn sure wouldn't make them now. Like,
no, and we'll get to it, but that the ending of this movie is definitely in a similar vein of, like, you just don't really know what to think, and there are so many moments during this movie that will give you chills, without a doubt. Like, the ending is definitely one of those moments too.
Yeah, once you really feel like once you figure out what the movie is about too, I mean, and Friedkin explains it. I've watched a ton of interviews with him, and he explains it in every single one the same way what the movie's about. Once you figure that part out of it too, it just makes it all the more kind of powerful to watch the movie. But let's see who we got in here right now. Like I said, I don't think we'll have a ton of people in here, but I'm really kind of.
Oh, we should.
We should, but
absolutely,
yeah. So we got Spurgier, who says he loves this movie. X-Ray Punch says it's top shelf Friedkin. Alexander Lumberjack says he's never seen this one. Ken Carlson. 4 men condemned by their past, robbed by their future. Yep. Stuntman Mark, seems like he's in all these, which is great.
Yeah, cool guy.
Video Horror System. What's up, boys? He loves Sorcerer, Texas, HXCX. Movie Junkie John's in here. Has never seen Sorcerer, but I plan to soon. The bridge scene looks. We're gonna get into that. I'll be honest with you. I love that scene. I don't actually think that's my favorite scene in the movie, though.
It might be my second favorite scene in the movie, and I think we might have the same favorite scene.
I mean, there's like 3 or 4 scenes towards the end where it could, like, the set pieces are so amazing. It could be any of those scenes.
There's a lot of scenes. There's, like, you could easily make a top 5 list of favorite scenes in this movie. It's full of them, to be honest.
Yes. So
and John, put this to the top of your list, dude, because I'm telling you, it's fantastic. It really is fantastic.
Yeah, so I guess like a one way to start this would be just give like a brief kind of intro into the film about like the budget and kind of how Friedkin decided to make this film. This was his next film after The Exorcist, was it not?
Yeah, yes. It was. Yeah, he did The French Connection and The Exorcist, and I like The French Connection. I really like that movie a lot.
Yeah.
Of course, The Exorcist, you don't really need to say much about that. And then, to follow up with this, they're all very different movies. I think this one has a little bit more similarities to The French Connection in a way, not just because of Roy Scheider, but and that type of actor and all that. But they're very different movies. And to follow up with a movie like this after The Exorcist, I don't think people really knew what to expect.
No, and it's really hard to follow a movie like The Exorcist anyway. I mean, for anybody to follow a movie that's that kind of, revered and just that classic of a film would be almost impossible. So,
Oh, yeah, he
but
knocked it out of the park with this. This is about as good of a follow up as you could have to The Exorcist.
I was getting ready to say, like, I mean, I think that he did it. Like, I think that, like, looking back, now, if people would look back at this movie now, I think that you could easily say that, but I don't think people felt that way at the time. Yeah.
Thank you, Star Wars.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, for people that don't know, Sorcerer came out in 1977 and was kind of absolutely buried by Star Wars, which came out around exactly the same time. I think it was the same week or maybe a week or two, ahead of this one. And essentially, I think what happened is that Friedkin's style of filmmaking, which up to that point was pretty cutting edge, the landscape completely shifted after Star Wars came out. And it was just more about, fantasy, popcorn, films like that, lighthearted adventure kind of films. And there was nothing about his films that were easy or lighthearted or, feel good kind of movies.
No. And this one really isn't either.
No.
To be honest.
And it's like, Jesus, what's weird is I think that of his 5 or 6 most famous films, I think The Exorcist is probably the happiest in terms of the endings. Like, it's weird to say, but I think it was probably the most hopeful of any of those films.
Yeah, it really was, honestly. I agree.
So, okay, The Sorcerer, like we said, so everything that I've heard Friedkin talk about, he says basically the same thing, which is when he made The Exorcist, he was making a film about the mystery of faith, and he wanted to next make a film about the mystery of fate. So, meaning that we have no real control over like what happens to us, like outside forces and things like that. So, he wanted to make a film that pretty much explored that as the centerpiece of the film, where all these people come together, but really like what happens to them is kind of out of their hands. Like, and it's very like Quentin Tarantino-esque, way before Quentin Tarantino, like the way that it all kind of plays out too.
Yeah, especially with the different plot lines, the different characters coming together that don't know each other, stories crossing, all that type of stuff. That's definitely something that you can tell that Tarantino took a note from, which I believe, I think Sorcerer I read was actually he said it was one of his favorite movies.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of scenes that we get into where I just know for a fact that he lifted like whole parts of them when he was making other films. Like you can just see it, like by the way that this whole scene is shot.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the beginning of the film is basically cut up into 4 different subparts. And it's really like a pretty cool, quick way to get to know like all the characters, right? So you've got these 4 different little vignettes basically that open the movie. And you get to know like the main 4 characters that you're going to kind of go along with like towards the end of the film too. So the first one is a guy by the name of Nilo, who is it Nilo or Nilo? I'm not entirely sure.
I don't know.
Who you're introduced to him by basically he assassinates a guy in a apartment and just kind of walks out of the room, and that's the introduction of the movie too.
Yeah, he walks in, shoots a guy. You get the idea that he's a hitman or of some sort, and he just walks away out into the street, and he's gone. And then we move to the next story. Yeah,
so the next one is, I believe it's in Israel or Jerusalem or something like that, and it's just a couple of terrorists who plant a bomb out the side of a building and kind of walk off, and it explodes. Which
Yeah, and then they've got the military are after them in that scene. There's like a couple of soldiers that are because they're hiding out in a building where they're going to be planting that bomb, and the explosion in that scene, like it really catches you off guard. To be honest,
Yeah.
like you kind of know what they're doing, but the way that it's edited, when that bomb goes off and it blows a hole in the side of that, I don't know if it was an apartment building or whatever it was, it's massive. It's a massive explosion, and that is something that you will see time and time again in this movie. The pyrotechnics in this movie are off the chain, dude. They are off the chain.
Yeah, like
dude,
every explosion in the movie or anything like that is just amped up to 11. Like where he must have been like, just give me as much shit as you can just to blow this stuff apart.
And they don't come across, the explosions and stuff in this movie do not come across in like a Indiana Jones
No.
kind of like Hollywood movie where it looks good, but it doesn't really hit you emotionally, right? The explosions in this movie, they feel so real. And they, this was not CGI. I mean, those are real explosions.
Well, that's the beauty part about this movie, is that it feels real. Like everything about it feels real, because essentially everything about it was real. I mean, it was filmed where it was filmed, on location in the jungle. Everything you see in it, there's no optical effects, there's no visual effects, there's nothing like that. It's all done. Like when you see something explode, I mean, they really blew the shit out of it. When you see, the truck go across the bridge, it's really the truck going across the bridge. Like everything is done in camera, which is insane when you think about what's in this film. Like that they were able to pull that off.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that terrorist attack scene, that's a really good scene.
And then the next scene, is the scene with the I guess he's French, and I can't tell if he's a banker or some sort of like, he's just he's a businessman of some kind. And anyway, you find out that he's been like defrauding a company or something like that, and these members of this board are getting ready to press charges on him. And he basically convinces them to give him a day or something like that before they do it. And then he just skips the fuck out of town and leaves his family.
Well, yeah, what happens is he, they're accusing him of fraud. And so he's got his business partner with him. And he's like, okay, well, give me 24 hours because I can come up with the collateral for this. And they say, if you can come up with this money, and I can't remember the amount. It was some insane amount of money. And he's like, well, I have a guarantee from someone else that I can get the money, so just give me 24 hours.
Yeah.
It was to his business partner, and they're kind of like shitting their pants, like, what are we going to do? And this guy, which I think his name is Victor. I think his name is Victor in the movie.
It is, yeah.
He goes to his business partner, and he's like, you need to ask your dad for this money, because I guess their dad is in some sort of business as well. And he's like, no, my dad said, he's like, he can't help us out, So that's kind of a crazy, that's one of the two previous ones, the assassination, that was really quick. Nothing too crazy about that. The explosion in the terrorist attack scene, that was more intense. This one's a little heavy hitting because his business partner kind of says, my dad said he can't help us out. He's not going to front the money for us. He said that we took the risk and we have to suffer the consequences of the fraud or whatever.
Yeah.
And then he meets his buddy at a restaurant and takes him outside, and he's like, no, talk to your dad one more time. Just tell him, like, convince him that we need this money. And the business partner goes into his car and just shoots himself, kills himself, because he realizes we're not going to get out of this. So our character Victor he sees that his buddy killed himself, and he just literally just runs away. He just he just runs. He's at dinner with his family. Yeah. He's at dinner with his wife, and I don't know. I don't think they had a kid, but did they have? I can't remember if he had a kid or not. His wife.
I know they had, because in the truck scene he's like, no children.
That's
Yeah, I
right.
remember
That's
that.
right. Okay,
Yeah.
so he just leaves his wife in the restaurant and just books it and runs. So out of all of these stories, he kind of has the most. You kind of feel a little bit more for this guy because you're not really given a whole lot of backstory on whether or not he's like actually such a crooked piece of shit or whatever. It's
And
kind
even
of
if he is, like, his is kind of the lesser of all of the different
right,
stories. Yeah.
right. He got caught in a legal loophole, legal troubles. Basically, he's not a killer or anything like that.
Right.
So yeah, he skips and he's gone.
So then you get to Roy Scheider's character, who's the American character in the film, who him and this group, this gang ends up there. They're robbing this church, and during during the robbery, they end up. I think they either shoot or kill a priest. I can't remember if they injure him or just kill him. I can't remember which one it
They
is.
do. They shoot him. I guess I don't know if like so they go to the church, right? And
Yeah,
I don't know if they're like laundering money out of the back of the church. I think they are because I believe that the priest that gets killed in the back room once the heist goes wrong is connect. It's the brother of this like mob boss, and
right.
so they go in. They try and take this money from this church, and it looks as though it's like that scene in Scarface, right, where they're counting all the money and stuff.
Yeah,
It's just like that. They take the money, they get out of there. I think they don't kill that priest, but he's like, because he says, go get my brother. You know, we've been hit. So they're driving along after the church, and this is where you get kind of a not a car chase scene, but it's reminiscent of a Friedkin car scene in a way, where like because he's famous for the car chase scenes, but you do get an insane car crash,
that's what I was going to say. Yeah, that
and
is real. I'm thinking. I mean, it's you know.
it is, I believe. I think it took like 12 takes and a couple of days to get that scene correct because what happens is they're driving the car, they're trying to get away from the scene of the crime. They start bickering in the car. Roy Scheider's driving the car. There's three guys in the back, one guy in the passenger seat. And the guy in the passenger seat starts kind of bickering with the guy in the back seat. And they get into an argument. Dude in the back seat pulls a gun and puts it to the guy's neck in the passenger seat. Roy Scheider turns around to kind of, tell him knock it off or whatever.
Yeah, like what the fuck? Yeah.
And then a truck pulls out right in front of them and they crash into the truck. And their car just slides, I don't know how far, but I think you see a body fly out the window and
You
slide
do, and it
on the
looks
It
looks
looks
pretty
real.
legit. Yeah.
It looks 100% real. I mean, it's like a rag doll, like what you would see in kind of like a some kind of a gore video or something where
I really can't stress enough too how like in these movies don't look like typical like action movies that were out around these times. Like the stuff in them actually looks real. It's not like I'm not sure how he went about getting that kind of effect or anything like that, but like the way that he made movies just was completely different than anybody else that was making the more like glamorized movies of that time period. I mean, some of it looks a little lo-fi, a little low budget or whatever, but it looks brutal. I mean, that's the only word I can think of. Like in a lot of ways, like when you see it, like you don't feel like you're just watching something, some throwaway kind of death from, like
or
a
like
Star
an action
Wars,
movie.
yeah, or something or like a Raiders of the Lost Ark, or even like a, later on like a Lethal Weapon or something like that. Like it doesn't hit you that way. Like it really
No,
seems
no.
real.
But they crash the car and everybody in the car dies and it's bloody, it's realistic, there's bodies, and Roy Scheider is the only one that lives. He's able to crawl out of the car, but he's like severely wounded.
Yeah.
And he kind of the police, you can hear the sirens in the background, and he kind of stumbles away. Then we have a scene where you find out that I believe the priest died that they shot.
Yeah.
And so you got two guys that work for this mob or whatever that was kind of they kind of owned that church, right?
Yeah.
And the boss of the operation is like, well, the only one guy got away. He lives here in Jersey. Like, he can't go anywhere. Like, we're going to find him and we're going to kill him. He sends two of his guys to search for this guy, put a hit out on him. And he says, I don't care how much it costs. I don't care what you have to do. I want this, you're going to kill this guy. So Roy Scheider is kind of forced into hiding for a little while. And that's kind of the last of the stories, which, by the way, I wanted to bring up a quick point is that the first three stories in the movie are subtitled.
Oh, that's, yeah.
Yeah. So that was a big deal because I think that had a big impact on the movie negatively because, first of all, people weren't really back then, especially for a Friedkin movie. He comes off The Exorcist and then he comes out with this movie Sorcerer, where they're like, well, is it going to be like a sci-fi movie? Is it going to be, whatever? And I believe I had read that people were walking out of theaters because of the subtitles, because the first 20 minutes or so of the movie is subtitled. So you're kind of like, is this the right movie? Like, what's going on here? A lot of people don't like subtitles. And I believe they had actually printed up like sheets of paper to put up in the theaters that said, like, due to, the fact that we have to the movie needs to explain some things. The first 15 minutes of the movie is going to be in subtitles, but don't worry, the rest of the movie is not subtitled. So, right. But I guess some people actually did walk out.
I mean,
right the movie.
If I didn't know, who Friedkin was or anything like that, and I was just watching this movie, I probably wouldn't make it through the beginning of this movie just because
it's confusing, right? You don't really know what you're seeing. It's all these different stories.
But he does that a lot in a lot of these movies. Like, I mean, I've noticed that too. Like, he just sets up these pieces and then just plays them out, but gives no real explanation as to what's going on. There's no real narrative as to why any of this is happening and why there's 4 different stories or anything like that. So in a way, it does feel like you're just kind of dropped into like chaos, like where you're just seeing all these different things happen and there's no real rhyme or reason to it.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I would say Roy Scheider's story of the mob and all that. I think that's the most interesting of the first of the introductions of those characters. I think they spend a little more time on that story as well because Roy Scheider is kind of the star of the movie in a way. I mean, not that he was like, this is another example of like how brutal and just how like ruthless William Friedkin is. He has no problem saying that he doesn't like people, right? And so
none.
He has openly stated in multiple interviews and books and all of that Roy Scheider was like the last ditch choice that he would have. He's like, listen, I did not want Roy Scheider to be the star of this movie. Like, he's not a star. He's not the star that I want to have in my movie. Like, he's fine as like a background character, or I think he called him like a second banana or something like that.
Well, I can't place what it is about him, but I agree too, because I don't hate him in this movie. Like, I think he does a good job, but there's something not there that like should be there.
I don't know if it's like the charisma that he's kind of lacking, like as like, because I know Steve McQueen was the first choice that William Friedkin wanted to have star in the film. And to be honest, like, I like Steve McQueen. I haven't seen too many movies. I've seen The Great Escape and stuff like that, but I don't know if that would have been an amazing choice for me personally either. Like, I don't know who would have been, the best for this role, but I think that Roy Scheider does fine in this.
Yeah, I mean that's what I mean. Like, he's not. I'll put it to you this way: like, I really, really hate Roy Scheider in Jaws 2. Like, I just think that his performance is just so wooden and boring. So, I mean, if you compare this to that, like, it's 1,000 times better. But if you compare, like, this to, let's say, even like William Peterson in To Live and Die in L.A., like, it's just something about Roy Scheider is just not a leading. He's not a leading guy.
Yeah, I can kind of see that. I mean, I do kind of see that. I don't know. I mean, William Friedkin is a filmmaker and he's a director, so he can kind of afford to be really picky about stuff like that. As a viewer, I don't think that it matters as much in this case, but I don't know. I thought Roy Scheider did okay. I mean, he
he's fine.
does kind of lack that charisma though, where you're just kind of really rooting for him in any way.
He's really though the only thing in this film that I have any kind of issue with, to be honest, is just I mean, I'm actually fine with everybody else who are all basically like unknowns. I mean, to anybody that's an English audience, like they're not. None of these other actors are known. You've got Bruno. I can read them off to you. Bruno Cremier, who plays Victor, the French guy. You got Francisco Rabal, who plays Nilo, the assassin. Amadou, that's just his. He only has one name, Amadou, and he plays Kasim, who's the terrorist. And you know, those are your main players. And so, I mean, this movie it has no main stars or anything. But that's
really.
kind of good because really to me the star of this movie is the scenery and the set pieces. Like, so I feel like if you had somebody in there, it would distract from how awesome all the rest of the movie is. Really,
the star of the movie is the story.
yes.
Right. It's like the journey of the characters, and so like you basically, you know, so all these people and you find out mainly through Roy Scheider's story, because somehow all the other guys got to the same place, and they don't explain how really they got there. But through Roy Scheider's story, he meets up with a friend who says, you know, listen, you got a hit out on you. You know, we need to make you disappear so that you'll be safe. So everybody else that we previously were introduced to obviously had a similar situation. They needed to get out of the States and go to a different country. And you basically, the guy says, you know, I can send you somewhere. I don't know where it's going to be. I just know that you'll be safe. You know, you're going to be away from here. I genuinely don't know where you're going to be sent to. And they are, I don't know. What was the country? Did they even say what the country was? Colombia.
I believe it was Colombia. Yeah.
Yeah. So all of our characters that we were just introduced to get sent to this like village in Colombia, and they are basically just there to bide their time in a way and figure out what they're going to do with.
Yeah, they're just all hiding for different reasons, you know.
Right. Yeah. And they don't know each other, and they're just kind of biding their time and figuring out, I guess, what they're going to do with like the rest of their lives. You know,
yeah,
because they all changed their names. I think they don't tell anybody really anything much about them. I know Roy Scheider has a fake, which I probably all of them do, right? But I think, you know, definitely Roy Scheider has a fake.
Yeah, it's like
identity.
Something Dominguez, like Juan Dominguez, or something like that. That's clearly not his name. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. There's even a scene later on where the authorities like totally call him out on it, and he gets busted. But you know, get to that. But you know, they all take different names. They have fake passports, this and that. And when the hitman arrives on this in this, is it an island or it's just like a remote area of the?
Yeah, I think it's just like a remote kind of jungle area of Colombia. Yeah.
Dude, these bots are hitting your chat hard tonight.
I know. This is just like me just trying to get rid of squirt bots. Yeah.
But I
love this though. Only Putin didn't find a girl with us. That's the tagline.
They're getting a little bit hard. You know, you got to kind of give them a little bit of credit.
They're getting better, yeah.
But whenever the hitman guy arrives on a plane, Roy Scheider's already there, and I think he might be like the last person to arrive in this remote area. He gets there on the plane, and then you have a cool cameo by Joe Spinell.
That's right.
Spinell yeah. So Roy Scheider, you find out, is kind of working, and they're all kind of working these like no money jobs where they're making like zero money or very, very little money, like just enough to kind of get by because this is like a poor community. It's like, that it's just people are, you can tell it's like a very rundown, remote area of the country. And Roy Scheider, I guess, is working as like a just kind of a laborer at this like airport, if you even want to call it that. It's just where the planes land in the middle of a field.
Yeah, just a strip, like an airstrip. Yeah.
Yeah, so you have Joe Spinell makes kind of a cool cameo, and he's one of the guys that's helping them unload the plane and stuff. And so this is where they all kind of convene and end up beating each other for one very important reason, right?
Yeah, and it's weird as as a side note to this too. So Joe Spinell shows up in this, and then he shows up in Cruising. I don't know
Yes.
if he had any other like roles in Friedkin, but Friedkin must have liked something about him. I just wish that like he had bigger parts in either one of those movies, because he's amazing, especially in Cruising. As like
I was gonna say
yeah.
His part in Cruising, he's got a little bit of a bigger part in Cruising. I mean, definitely bigger than in this movie. He's got a funny scene in this movie though, where he's trying to drive that truck, like when they're doing tryouts.
Yeah.
So who's going to drive the truck, and he's just like going crazy.
Exactly.
He's not even trying.
He is a really underrated actor. Like in anything I've ever seen him in, he always just like steals whatever scene he's in. So
he's got a really good knack for having those like side roles in movies. Like he definitely deserved more starring roles like Maniac and stuff like that. But when you see him, in a way, it's sad that he's gone, but he's a guy that when you see him in a movie in one of these small roles, you're glad to see him. You're just like, man, Joe Spinell's in this. Like, this is going to be, at least, if nothing else is good about this movie, at least Joe Spinell was here. So there's actually a really good documentary on YouTube called The Joe Spinell Story. And it's all about Joe Spinell. It's about, his life, his start in the movies. And I mean, he had an amazing career.
I was getting ready to say, think about all the shit he was in for a second. Just as like, even if you just like what he was in, even not his character or anything. He was in Rocky. He was he was in The Godfather.
Yeah.
He was in this. He was in it's like some of the biggest, like most influential movies of all time.
And and he had a really good part in Walking the Edge. I don't know if you've seen that movie. Fun City Editions put that out through Vinegar Syndrome. I highly recommend, dude. That Black Friday sale, put that on your list. Walking the Edge, and he's got a role in that it's more than just a side role. He plays a bad guy in that, but he's not a starring role. But he's really enjoyable to watch in that movie. Robert Forster is the star of that movie. And that's just like a super underrated movie that I had never heard of before. And I'm a big Fun City Editions fan. I like pretty much everything they've put out I've really enjoyed. But Walking the Edge is definitely a good one with Spinell to check out.
John Dean, he says, what's all this porn stuff? Buddy, them are the squirt. Those are the squirt bots. We can't get rid of them. They just keep coming in here and like trying to get us to find girls with them.
Yeah, Cinemurdum says he was in Taxi Driver. Yep, he was in Taxi Driver. And like before I really knew like who Joe Spinell was, when I was just kind of getting into movies in general, I remembered his characters to me stood out in Taxi Driver, as small as it was. He's just a guy that I don't want to get off. We're getting off on a Joe Spinell tangent here, but anyway, Joe Spinell rules, and he's in this movie.
Yeah, I could get like a whole thing on Maniac at some point too. So basically, this is all. We're all talking about this setup to get all these guys who don't know each other, who have no kind of relationship together, who just kind of show up by fate in the same village, small village in Colombia. And at this same time that this is going on, the main kind of, what would you call it? Like the main company in this village is this oil company that is, they
provide jobs for people and
stuff, they're basically exploiting all these villagers and stuff at the same time. Because
right.
One of the big scenes, like before all this goes to hell, is that a bunch of the villagers are out working, and then like one of the oil towers explodes. They get covered in oil, and then like end up, which I thought this was a great scene too, as a side to everything else that is great at the end of the movie. So they all get covered in oil and like burn up and they die, and then there's like flames and shit shooting up, which I'm sure is probably real. Like Friedkin probably like exploded a real fucking oil tower or something like that.
I mean, dude, that speaking of explosions, like we said earlier, that scene where the oil well explodes is like otherworldly. The oil well explodes. The little huts and stuff near it, like because I'm assuming there's probably irrigation of oil underneath them. Those explode. There's people on fire. There's a guy crawling on the ground with like. There's a guy crawling on the ground and his like arm is like half cut off, and he's just like trying to crawl.
And I'm pretty sure it's an actual guy who's got an arm off. Like I think
And then you see his arm, and like 2 seconds later, you see his arm in another shot, and it's just like a massive, like the cinematography and the shot from like they probably filmed it from a helicopter, obviously. It just of this flame shooting into the air. It's amazing. The cinematography in the movie is like it's top notch.
But the scene that got me though is like when they bring the trucks back. There's all these armed guys bringing, and they come back with the trucks. And
trucks carrying the bodies of the people that died in the explosion.
So they pull up to the village, and they're just basically, I can't remember what they're doing, but they're not acknowledging the dead in any way, like the bodies that are in the trucks really at all.
I think they were trying to like hide it from because like the whole town comes out and like starts crowding around the truck, and they're pissed because they're like, you let this happen. And
then everything just goes silent. And as they like take the bodies out of the back of the truck and kind of pass them, kind of like body surfing style, like on top of the people. Yeah. And that's just such an amazing thing because there's no sound really. Like everybody's dead quiet, and they're just kind of like, and then they all get like pissed, and they're all kind of like chasing all the army guys down and stuff.
They set the truck on fire.
Yes.
They set the truck on fire because they're, the one guy kind of takes off the covering over the bodies, and it's just a shot of like a charred, burned body, and everyone just goes silent, and then they just kind of empty the bodies out of the truck and take them, and the whole village is like stunned and shocked by this, because that's their people, it's their family members and stuff that died, and it's a brutal fucking scene, dude. It's brutal.
It's but like, it's also like really, really powerful too. It comes in the middle of like nothing really like that is going on, and then that scene comes in, and it just like changes the whole tone of the movie. Like after that point, and so here's the part that I'm kind of still confused on. No, goddamn, the squirt monster back. They're really listen.
They really pick the screens where they know people like, oh, no one knows what Sorcerer is. Let's get in on there and.
Like, let's get in here. Like, we're going to get some people some pussy, boys. But, hold on one second. Feeling rad, Lewis.
Uh-oh. He's here to check up on you to see if you're being rad or not.
Oh, it's going to get radder. I am one of the new radishes, which is my term for their fans. The radishes.
That's perfect.
So, this is the part I don't get. Maybe you can help me with this part because I don't get this.
Okay.
For some reason, there's this eternal like flame shooting up out of the ground. Now that part I get because like the oil thing exploded and all that. But the only way they can fix that is they have to have dynamite, and that's the part where I don't understand. Are they saying they have to blow up?
So what have you ever seen the movie There Will Be Blood?
Oh yeah, dude, but that's been like right when it came out one time.
Well, that movie has that's all about the oil well and the oil business and stuff. And so remember the scene in that too, where the oil well explodes, very similar to this movie. And it's just a flame that's shooting into the, 100, 200 feet into the air.
Yeah, straight up into the air, yeah.
And it's not going to stop because obviously the oil is coming from the earth. So it's a constant flow of oil and gas and flame. So what they have to do is they have to get dynamite to get to the site of the explosion, and they're going to use the dynamite, and it's basically going to implode the hole where that original explosion happened, and so it kind of covers up the whole area and kind of closes up that initial explosion, right?
Collapses
so
on, yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So it can extinguish the fire and stuff like that.
That makes sense. So really, that's the real essence of what this movie is about. So because basically the whole setup for this movie is that all these guys end up having to be the guys that take this dynamite that they need in these two trucks to this oil refinery place. Like, that's the real gist of the story.
Right, right.
And I don't know. That sounds like when I say it, it sounds so much less interesting than it actually is.
Yeah, you know what? I was going to say that, like, a lot of the stuff that we might be talking about, especially once they get into the trucks and, like, their journey there, we're going to be explaining some things, and it's not going to sound as intense or as suspenseful. But when you're watching it, like, when you're watching the movie, it hits in a way that, it sounds so simple and so kind of like, oh, it's just guys driving some trucks to 200 miles away to this, they're just driving trucks with explosives in the back. Well, I mean, the way that it's filmed and the way that it's written and the editing and all that, it's so believable, and it really gets under your skin as to, like, some of the scenes where they're trying to drive this. Well, the main thing is that the TNT, the dynamite that they're using, the only dynamite that they have that can be taken to this site 200 miles away is damaged, because it's, like, stored in literally just like a shack in the woods.
Yeah.
And it's damaged. The boxes of dynamite are damaged, and it's leaking like what is it, like
nitroglycerin? Yeah.
Nitroglycerin, right? So they go to the shack. They're like, okay, well, this is all the dynamite we have. This is where we store it. It's damaged. So if you kick the box, or you drop the box of dynamite, or you even just, like, accidentally, like, if it moves the wrong way, the box will explode because it's damaged and it's fragile. But that's the only choice they have, is to use that dynamite.
Yeah. So they have no other dynamite. They have no other trucks other than these two, and they basically have no other, like, route, because this is like the middle of the jungle. They have no other route to be able to travel other than this one
through the jungle.
Through the jungle, which is not paved or nothing like that. Yeah.
No. So which is funny, because that's, of course, when they're like, okay, they find guys that are good enough drivers to drive these trucks, which happens to be, of course, our main characters that we were introduced to earlier. Besides one guy that gets picked, which was that was a German guy, was one of the guys that got picked to drive.
That's right.
And the hitman from earlier kills that Russian guy, or the German guy, because he's like, no, I want to be one of the drivers because I want to be paid for this job so that I can get out of this situation that I'm in, because I need the money. So he assassinates that guy. They get these trucks and they load the TNT, the dynamite, into the back of these trucks. And their job is to drive it 217 miles exactly, to the site of this explosion at the oil well, so that they can, resume their business. And because that's the lifeline of this village is that oil business. So kind of a little thing I thought about when I was rewatching this, the way that they store the dynamite in the back of those trucks is they put, like, sand in the back of the truck, like about like half a foot high. And then they put the boxes of dynamite, 6 boxes, I think it is. 2 trucks, about 6 boxes in each of them. Wouldn't you think that they would have just, like, surrounded the boxes or in, like, bags of sand so that they couldn't move, like, at all? But no, they don't do that. They just kind of put some sand in the back of the truck,
or anything. Yeah, like built. Like, you think, okay, So there's a whole montage, by the way, of them getting these trucks ready where they're fucking like working on the timing belts and they're, cleaning the engines and all this stuff and repainting the whole trucks and getting the lights ready and all that. But the thing they skimp on is the giant things of dynamite that are leaking nitroglycerin. Yeah, you would think they would build like a whole thing around them that would like maybe a wooden crate system where they couldn't move or something like that.
Right. But
no,
it's just like,
they just stick them in like 6 inches of sand and
Yeah.
just like the boxes
they can't slide around. They can't slide around, but like if it gets like bumpy or like something happens,
yeah.
it could fucking explode at any time. So I just wondered to myself, like, well, why didn't they just kind of build something like you said, or just fill the entire back of the truck with like sandbags or something like all around it, so like you cover it up, whatever. They didn't.
At the very least, I feel like they could have tied a rope around them and like attached it to the sides to where it couldn't move.
Right.
But anyway, I mean, I guess if they did anything like that, it would distract from the suspense of the film, which is like that these giant crates of dynamite are back there and that they're very volatile. So they get out of the montage of it. They take off into the jungle, and all this stuff. I can't stress enough like how awesome the cinematography is in this movie. I also can't stress like how little dialogue there is in this movie, and that was like Friedkin has said that was purposeful too, for a pretty funny reason, which was basically just so anybody in any country could watch this movie and know what was going on without having to like have subtitles or anything like that. So, in other words, like there's so little dialogue that you could show this in France and then like Brazil and then the U.S. and everybody can know what's happening without having to even know what they're saying. And it actually makes it, because he was focusing so much on the look and the cinematography and like telling the story by visuals. That's actually like the biggest selling point of this movie, really, especially when they get to the trucks in the jungle, because everything looks amazing. Like, I mean, they've got these aerial shots of the trucks going through these real fucking jungles, and I don't know where he was at. I can't remember exactly. He may have been in Colombia or he may have been South America somewhere. I'm not entirely sure. But, like, it all looks legit. It all looks amazing. You talk about a movie that should have a fucking 4K. I was thinking about that. Like, if there's any movie I want to see a 4K of, it's this movie. Like, there's no doubt in my mind.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think it's in the Dominican Republic.
That's right. Yeah.
Some of the stuff. Okay. But so it's kind of funny because the movie's 2 hours long, and it's pretty much exactly in the very middle of the movie when they get in the trucks and start driving. Like that, like the first hour is build up, and then the whole second half of the movie, exactly in the middle, is the journey in the trucks to get to the oil explosion. So it's, and we were talking about this earlier, like the second half of this movie, that second hour kind of flies by because after they get into the trucks and start driving, there's no dull moments or it's all suspense from there. It's like extremely high anxiety suspense. It's insane.
The very first, well, not the very first. I guess the very first kind of thing that happens is they have to like decide. This is like such a metaphor too. They have to decide. There's like these two different roads that they can go on. So they've been traveling for a while, and they come to this part where there's like a left and a right, turn that they can go to, and they're arguing about like which way to go. Like one of them says one way, and the other one says the other way. And so they finally pick, the route that they'll end up taking. And Friedkin is basically saying like this is the fate part where you're literally like in the fork in the road. You can choose like whichever way to go, and like whichever way you pick is going to be a certain set of consequences. And so they head in this one direction. And I think the first thing they come across, like the first big thing, is the bridge, right? Like that's
the first like really big suspenseful scene like the massively crazy suspenseful scene is the bridge. There's one scene before they get to that where they're kind of trying to take that sharp turn over that sort of like small wooden like bridge thing. It's
That's
not really
right,
a bridge. It's just like an overpass over like a very awkward turn. One guy gets out of the truck and he's kind of like telling the other guy, you know, turn, whatever. And just the shots of like the wheel is like on the very edge of this piece of wood, and it's like if it goes over, it's gonna tumble over the side of the hill. It's just like the way it's filmed and edited. It just you're sitting there like sweating watching this. Like,
by the way, there's so many shots of that where the tire is like, and you know they probably had to do this for real too, where the tire is like probably 2 inches from going off the side of this freaking like mountain, and you can see all the rocks and stuff like falling off, you know, the side as they're driving by.
Right, but yeah, the big scene in the movie that a lot of people talk about, it's on the poster, is the bridge scene. And it's, you know, it's not for nothing. I mean, that's maybe, like I said, the second favorite scene for me in the movie, is this bridge that they come to, and it's storming. It's a lightning, thunder, wind. Just think of the worst storm that you could possibly think of is happening. And they come to this bridge, and it's, when I say a bridge, I don't mean, cement and steel beams or anything like that. The bridge in this is like a jungle bridge where it's like pieces of wood and rope. It's pretty big, but it's not stable looking, to say the least. And
no, it looks like some bridge around here that would be like left,
right.
left over from like the 40s or something. Yeah.
So, and of course it's raining and storming. So there's like a raging river right below the bridge. So it's like, you know, they try, you know, Roy Scheider's like, you know, well, we can't turn around because it's this narrow road that they're on in the jungle, and they can't go back to try and take the other route. So,
well, there's a great part in this too, where the Nilo guy, the guy that said that was the assassin or whatever, like they get to this bridge, and Roy Scheider's like out, he's walking on the bridge and shit, like checking it out and like seeing, you know, if they can go over it, and that guy just like fucking takes off and goes the opposite direction. And then like Roy Scheider grabs him and he's like, "No, we're going across this fucking bridge. Like, get back here." Yeah,
you don't have a choice.
Scene.
Yeah, he does. He totally like shits his pants and gets scared, and like he's like, I'm out of here. Like, I cannot do this. And Roy Scheider, like you said, he grabs him and he's like, "No," he's like, "You're helping me. We're crossing this bridge. We don't have a choice. We have to get there." Like, they're not going to get paid for the job if they don't get. They're either going to die, or they have to get this dynamite to the explosion site, or else they don't get paid. Which the whole point of the movie is they need to get the money from this job to be able to leave the village that they're in to go and start a new life, a better life somewhere else.
Yeah.
So definitely one thing, you know, this scene is like I said, it's on the poster. It's a big scene in the movie. They slowly crawl across this bridge in the truck. I think it's Roy Scheider he's standing on the bridge in front of the truck while the other guy drives, or is it the other way around?
It's the other way around. It's the one guy, the Nilo guy, I think, is on the bridge. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's on the bridge, like walking ahead of the truck while Roy Scheider drives, and they're going slow. It's raining, storming, crazy river below. And the anxiety is just insane. There it is again, dude.
Yeah, I know. I've never seen this many like of these bots,
but yeah, high anxiety. I mean, just the bridge is like tilting and turning, and the truck is like off balance. At one point, the hitman guy, he's walking and he like falls through one of the boards in the bridge and almost falls to his death. He's able to and while he's down there, Roy Scheider's driving.
Still driving, yeah.
I can't see you, and almost runs the dude over.
That's such a good scene too, because, like all hell's breaking loose at that point. The wind, the rain, and everything. The truck, the bridge is like creaking, and then when he falls in the water, like all the sound drops out. Mm-hmm. That was a cool thing too. Where like yeah, once he's in the water, it's like it would be like his, you know,
Perspective.
perspective. Like once he's in there, so all the sound drops out until he comes back up, and then like you can hear all the other stuff, which
Yeah.
I thought was a cool like kind of piece of sound editing in the film too.
Well, I believe that this movie, the only award that the movie won at all was for the sound design
That makes sense.
in the movie. Yeah, and it does make sense. But yeah, that's a crazy scene. I mean, they I don't want to give everything away. You definitely need to watch it to experience the suspense and the anxiety of it.
Yeah, I
But
mean it's like trying to talk about opera or something. Like it's like trying to talk
yeah,
about like the best forms of music. Like you can't really do it justice by just talking about it. Like somebody's gotta watch it. But needless to
uh,
say, like the way that it was achieved, because you're watching it and they're like, how the fuck would they even do it? Because the trucks are massive and the
mhm,
bridge is like just like a drawbridge basically, like a suspension bridge.
yeah,
And you're like, how the hell would they even like? Because it looks 100% real, and I guess in a way it is. But I know Freakin had said there was hydraulics like underneath the bridge that the trucks were attached to
yeah.
that you don't ever see, that are kind of like moving, and helping move the trucks forward and things like
Yeah,
that
and then
too.
helping the bridge kind of move side to
Yeah, like
side.
side to side as well. And
Um,
it's like all of it looks. So you got the idea that the truck will fall, but you've also got the idea that he'll run over the guy, because those
yep.
two things are constantly like in play like throughout that scene. And I
Um,
think that maybe the second truck is even more kind of like crazy as the first, because there's two trucks coming across. So
yeah.
one Scheider gets across, then the other guy's got to get across. And looking back
So
on that scene too.
um, one thing I wanted to bring, I was looking up some trivia about the movie too, just to kind of prepare for this. And so the bridge, that was real. They definitely had to drive that over the bridge. They built the bridge from scratch for the movie specifically, obviously, and it cost $1 million to build the bridge. And the initial location that they were using, which was in the Dominican Republic, they built the bridge, they had it set up, and the river below the bridge went completely dry. It went dry for the first time in history. I guess there was a drought or something that happened, like as they were setting the bridge up, and so they obviously couldn't film there anymore. So you want to talk about fate, right? You want to talk about like the story of the movie. The whole thing is fate. They built this bridge and they couldn't use it because the what were they going to do? There was no water anymore, right? So they had to tear the
Mm.
bridge down and move it to a new location for an additional $1 million to rebuild the bridge.
And rebuild the whole thing. Yeah.
Right, and then so they were able to use the second location, which I guess was, there were people that, because this was in, again, this is not a sound stage, it was on location filming. The people that were living there apparently were not happy with the way that they were kind of handling building this bridge, and the fact that drought was going on and stuff. I guess they had to have people on guard watching the bridge at all times, because there were people that had threatened to like blow up the bridge or damage the bridge, because they were like, we don't want you here doing this. So they had to have like security guarding the bridge. But just the
Yeah. It
stuff,
was.
behind the scenes stuff, type stuff of this movie also is just insane. I mean, I think most of the crew contracted diseases and got sick during filming
Well,
because,
freaking himself, he got malaria. I know that.
yeah,
A lot of the cast and crew got malaria and or like dysentery, things like that. Just a lot of illness, and not. I don't know if there's that many injuries, but there was a lot of like sickness and illness and things like
right,
that too.
yeah, because this is like it, in a way it kind of makes me think of like a cannibal holocaust type situation, where it's like, you can tell by what you're seeing on the screen that the conditions of filming were very poor, and not, it wouldn't be a film set that you would necessarily want to be working on, like, whatsoever.
Yeah,
Like,
put it to you this way: even the extras in this film, you can tell they weren't from like central casting. Like you
no.
can tell these extras came from some jungle, like some village somewhere. like 100%, like not professional actors, actresses, anything like that.
No.
But yeah, that was a good point though about the bridges, and the people in these towns were like really superstitious, and believed that the drought was being caused by these people coming and filming this movie, and they were gonna make sure that it didn't happen.
Yeah, crazy. But that
yeah,
the bridge scene is like the first kind of Hollywood style suspense type scene in the movie. But there's a scene after that I think might be your favorite, and I think it's also the one that I'm going to pick as my favorite scene.
There's two or three scenes coming up, like one right after the other that I think are some of the best action set pieces that have ever been filmed. Possibly the best. I think the next scene, they get past this bridge. Both trucks and by the way, there's a scene where Roy Scheider's like, they'll never make it across that bridge. Like, we're going to be able to just have we'll just be two people, so we'll get this amount of money instead of four or whatever. So he's still a dick, he was that whole thing. And but they all get across, and so they're going around and traveling through the jungle, and then they come across. And this scene is beautiful too, by the way. It looks like amazing. They come across this giant like fallen tree. And I mean, the thing is like the diameter is like the size of a house or something. Like, it's huge. And, the assassin guy gets out and he sees it, and he just like starts dying laughing because he's like, they got through all that and now they can't. There's a giant tree that nobody could move. Like, there's no way. Like, it's,
It's like one of the giant redwood trees in California. Like something, I don't know what kind of tree it was, but it's like, I don't know, God, 15 feet around. It's just this, it's a tree that's fallen over the road in front of them that there's no way you could possibly get around this to get by.
Yeah, so it's like, I mean, that's the only road, that's the only path they've got. They've come all this way and made it through all this so far, and like, they just are screwed. And Roy Scheider starts freaking out. And, chopping the woods up and all this shit with his machete. And then I think it's Amadou, the terrorist guy, which makes sense.
I didn't think about that.
I hadn't thought about it until right now, but yeah, that makes a lot of sense. He's the guy that he's like, I can do this. Like, I have to have this, this, and this, but we'll use like some of the nitroglycerin and he sets up what's essentially like a booby trap kind of thing on a pulley system where they'll put the nitroglycerin on the tree and then hang like a rock, and it'll fall and hit a flint and then blow up.
Yeah.
That scene is like, I was like, well, this could be interesting or whatever. When you see the explosion of that scene, you're like, how the fuck did anybody like I worry about anybody behind the camera. Did they just set a camera somewhere? They had to have, right? Because like that explosion is insane. Like, that fucking tree just vaporizes. Like, there's nothing, like, there's not parts of it. It just like is like sawdust. Like,
and for a solid like 8 minutes while they're setting up this pulley system and they're moving the box of nitroglycerin and the TNT on top of the tree and stuff, there's zero dialogue. There's no dialogue.
Nothing. Yeah.
There's no music even. There's no music. It's just them setting up this, trying to, because they got to be careful. They don't want it to explode. And they're setting up this like booby trap system to hopefully blow this tree out of the way. And they move the trucks. They get out of the way. They leave the one guy, the terrorist guy, there to kind of cut the hole in the sandbag. So
that whole scene was awesome, by the way. It's like some Indiana Jones shit, where he has to replace the, So there's like a bag of sand, and like he's got it on like a Y kind of stick, on like that's stuck in the ground. And he takes a knife and sticks it into the bag, so the sand slowly kind of comes out. And when it all comes out, the bag will fall, which will cause the rock to fall, and that it's fucking.
The explosion again is just. They had to have just set up a camera, like you said, and just
there's no way anybody
got out of there. I mean, I don't see, because this is all practical effects. Like, this is not CGI. This is it's insane. I just can't, like I said, like there are multiple explosions in the movie, and that is maybe the greatest one in the entire movie. Is just that tree just being vaporized, and there's no other way I can describe it. I mean, it's something you have to see for yourself to kind of just see how amazing it looks.
And yeah, and the beautiful thing about it is they actually did this. And Friedkin was talking about, the first guy that they had doing the special effects, the explosions and stuff. He tried to do it, and it basically just didn't. It was like, just a regular little. It really didn't put a dent in the tree or anything. So he actually got a guy that was known to be like an arsonist, that was known to be an explosives kind of expert and an arsonist. Apparently Friedkin had like a lot of connections in the underworld, including the mafia and all these, crooked cops and stuff too. To hook this thing up, and that's the explosion that you see in the movie. Like this guy just like blowing this shit up, like that. That guy had to be just like coming all over himself too, just like doing that. He's just like, yes,
he's set for life.
Yeah, he's like, finally, let me.
Yeah. But then they blow the tree out of the way, and it worked, and they are able to pass through that obstruction. And, it's like, of course, everything on this trip that can go wrong will go wrong. I mean, that's really where all the suspense comes from. They did the bridge. They got past that. They get past the tree in the road. They blow it to shreds. But they're not done yet. They still have a little while to go, and more terrible things.
There's two, and I don't know like how. See, I was wondering about this too because I really, really want people to see this movie and like not know. You know what I mean? Like not know all the awesome scenes that happen in it.
Right. Because once you kind of get past the tree scene, that's when sort of spoiler territory comes in.
Yeah, like and I don't know how really to talk about it. Here's what I'll do. I'll say this, okay? Like, so there's a scene in the movie, without giving away like what happens in that's probably my first or second favorite scene in the film. That when I was watching it, I was like thinking to myself, that's where Tarantino got the fucking scene in Pulp Fiction where he shoots the guy in the face. The scene where they're like driving in the car in Pulp Fiction, and I forget the guy's name. Like Travolta's like turned around and he's
with his hand there, yeah.
And that's all I could think about was like, that's where that came from. Like, because the whole setup is basically the same, leading up to what happens. Not exactly the same. There's not even a gun or anything involved, but just the way that scene plays out, you're like, that's the only thing that came to my mind. Like,
it's Tarantino's classic like element of surprise method.
Yes.
Where you're the scene is going along at a normal pace, and you're kind of caught up in the dialogue of what's going on, characters talking, and just kind of it feels like a sigh of relief type of a moment when you're watching it, and then you're smacked in the face with something that is. I mean,
I think it's the most powerful scene in the film, really, other than maybe like the scene with the bodies too.
Yeah,
but like watching it, you're like you can just be in your brain. You're like, I can't believe that happened. Like I can't like that just.
Like you're kind of like, why would they do this to me?
Yeah, because, and that's kind of the whole point of this film is that, you don't really decide when anything's going to happen. Like it's all fate. So like you go through all this other stuff, you get through it, and then out of nowhere, something's going to happen.
Yeah.
But that's probably one of my favorite, if not my favorite scenes in the film.
I can agree with you there. I think that, that scene and probably the tree sequence are my two favorites. I don't know which one I could put first. I mean, there's too many parts of the movie that you could really rank, but I think that scene that we're talking about right now, without really giving too many spoilers, it really is like a smack in the face, and it's effective. It makes you feel bad.
I wish
And,
I wish I could talk about it because there's so many great scenes in like a 5 second. So much great camera work in like a 5 second scene.
yeah,
But
there is.
I
Yeah,
really
so,
want people just to watch it. Like,
yeah,
rather than me try to explain it, I think that would be a better
right. And
thing.
that's kind of a running theme of a review or a discussion like this, is that like we said before, it's us talking about it isn't really going to seem as, it's not going to get the point across 100%. You can't describe suspense or anxiety really when you really think about it. I mean, it's something that you kind of have to see and feel it yourself to really understand the feeling of it. But yeah, that the movie is kind of chock full of scenes that are high anxiety, but
Yeah.
and that's a heavy hitting scene. So that happens after the tree explosion scene, and then that's kind of getting into the into the home stretch of the movie. After that.
Because, I thought about it and I was like, okay, so that particular scene triggers the next scene, which is, they're kind of ambushed by these Roy Scheider and the Nilo character kind of ambushed by, I guess, the guerrillas. Like,
Yeah, something like that, like criminals, like
yeah,
they kind of look like, they're part of some kind of a military system that's not, like you said, like the guerrilla system of like, they're not part of the military, but they're kind of like a militia of
yeah.
criminals that are
I think there's four or
trying to,
five of them that come down and like surround their truck. And this is a great scene because it's kind of like the comic relief scene in the movie, where there's really no comedy in the movie other than this, really. Where the guy is like, he's talking to Roy Scheider and he's like, what do you got in the truck? And Roy Scheider's like, just supplies and toilet paper and stuff like that. So he's talking to the other guy in what I guess is like Spanish or some other language. And so, he's like talking to Roy Scheider in English, and he goes, so you don't have to worry about us. We're just here for the supplies. And then he says to the other guy in Spanish, he's like, we're going to take them both out and like execute them in the road. It's like, and they're trying to get the assassin, the Nilo guy, to come out of the truck because he's still in the front of the truck.
yeah.
And I don't know how much of that scene to give away either, but that scene's not as like, it's great. It's a great scene,
Yeah,
but it's not as
as
monumental
crazy as what had previously just happened, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, so the militia guys are like, yeah, they're trying to steal the truck. They want whatever's in the back of the truck. The guy, one of the criminals, kind of peeks in through the back and sees what really is in there, and kind of looks at the other dude, and he's like, we have to do something because that's not supplies.
Yeah.
It's fucking dynamite. So yeah, without saying too much, that kind of turns into a very, I don't know how to describe it. Like it's a pivotal
battle.
point. Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's a pivotal point in the movie.
Yeah.
And that is really like, like I said, that's, those last couple of parts there, like right after the criminals try to steal the truck, from that point on, it's really like the last 20 minutes. Like there's only like 20 minutes movie of the movie left.
Yeah. And that whole thing though, man, that 30-40 minute span of time is just like bam,
It
bam,
flies
bam, bam,
by.
bam. Yeah, because everything's
flies by.
happening. Like there's 4 unique kind of like sets that happen that are all fucking awesome. Like all of the things that happen on that. Number 1, look completely real. Number 2, like you could completely see any of it happening. And number 3, like they're just filmed so well that you don't even like you can't take your eyes off the screen, like watching all the stuff that's going on. So, needless to say, I thought this next scene too. So they get through. Let's just say they get through. that part, and
Yeah.
Roy Scheider is driving the truck in on like this kind of stretch, and this scene like was awesome as
It's
well
so wild.
because
It's so out of touch with, not out of touch in a bad way, but it's very different from the entire rest of the movie. Like
yes,
the cinematography and the shots that they chose to use. It's kind of ironic that Star Wars came out the same year, because that scene when they're driving through like it looks kind of
whatever
like
that is,
sand dunes or something like
yeah,
that. Like it's very weird. It totally reminded me of like the scene in Star Wars: A New Hope, where they're kind of like where the sand people or whatever are kind of like coming out,
yeah,
peeking around the rocks and stuff. It looked like that, like it. But in Friedkin's film, there's that like it's got like a blue tint over the whole entire screen, like
yeah,
everything. It's like nighttime, but it's got this like neon blue glow to everything on the screen, and in contrast to the rest of the film, which has been a very raw, not cleaned up type look. This is just it's like a dream sequence it comes across as almost.
yeah, and it's kind of like him losing his mind. Like I mean, all of the stuff like Scheider's like PTSD kind of stuff. He's having flashbacks, all the stuff that happened, in the car wreck, and he's thinking about everything else that's going on, and like seeing everything else that's going on or that's just happened, and he's kind of just losing it. And then the way that it's shot is completely different than in the way that any of the other movie is shot. Like you say, like
Mm-hmm.
it's all blue tints and like everything is real kind of dark and
It's
spread
almost like
out.
it has a little bit of a Twilight Zone feel to it
Yeah,
in
yeah.
a way.
So you can tell like it's meant to kind of show this kind of descent, that he's having while he says something like, what am I doing here, or like why am
Where
I
am I
here?
going? Where am I
Where am I
going?
going? Yeah, yeah, something
He's
like,
repeating the line from the beginning of the movie when his friend tells him,
yeah,
I'll be able to send you away. And he goes,
yeah,
well, where am I going? And his friend tells him, I honestly don't know. And that's kind of really that's the movie. That's the point of the movie. That is, William Friedkin said, because people were confused about the title, Sorcerer. Well, what is a
yeah,
sorcerer? A sorcerer is an evil kind of you think of a sci-fi or a fantasy movie like Lord of the Rings or something like that. In this movie, the sorcerer is fate. And so, that scene at the beginning where his friend tells him, Roy Scheider asks him, where am I going? And his friend tells him, I don't know. I honestly don't know. And the truth of the matter is none of them knew. None of them knew
yeah,
what was going to happen, where they would end up, what they would end up needing to do. It's like a great kind of a part that Friedkin put together with that sequence where he's kind of having that mental breakdown, where it just kind of ties everything together for Roy Scheider's
yeah,
character. And it's really
yeah.
good. It's a greatly filmed scene. But it does kind of catch you off guard because it looks very different from the rest of the movie. Like you said, it's kind of like a dream sequence, kind of Twilight Zone type
Yeah,
feel.
because if it was like, put it to you this way, if it was like a Spielberg or a Lucas movie or something, the end of that movie would be just like him driving that fucking truck in, and everybody would be like jumping around and like hugging him. Yeah, yeah. But in this, he has like a nervous breakdown, gets out of the truck, and basically walks like one thing of the dynamite
One box of dynamite. Yeah,
into the village and just fucking collapses.
yeah.
And that's
The truck breaks down two
yeah.
miles before the site of the explosion. So
But he
he just gets out of the truck. He's like in a state of delirium and wild, like he's tired. He's just a shell of a man at that point, and he's just carrying this one last box of dynamite. And he gets there, and I think maybe the biggest disappointment of the movie for me is that after that part where he walks up to and you see the flames shooting, it's nighttime, it's a great
yeah.
shot. We never get to see them explode.
Yeah.
We never get to see them using the TNT. I mean, it's obviously like it's obvious that they did because
Right.
they used it, but we never get to see them Oh, great. Thank you. Thanks for the TNT. We can finally
That
fix the
I didn't even
know,
think about that, but that is like because I was so caught up in all the other shit. But
right.
that's true. Like they use so many other explosions in this film.
Yeah.
Like that
Yeah.
would seem
And
to it
they
seemed to have
totally
made
left
sense.
that out. Like that's the climax of like, okay, finally they've got the TNT. They can blow up this. They can cave in that explosion site, but they just kind of gloss over it. And I kind of wonder why they chose to not film something like, unless there's like a deleted scene that I don't know about.
Hey, it's a good question. I honestly didn't think about it. Like it just it cuts from like them cheering, that he got it like to the next entire day or whatever.
Right.
So yeah,
So
I
then
don't
you
know.
get to Roy Scheider, and we get to cut to a scene where Roy Scheider's back in the village where he was originally given the job, and they provide a passport, like official. You don't have to worry about hiding your identity. Like we'll give you an official like passport, like so that you can you don't have to hide from the authorities anymore. He gets the money for the job, and he's kind of just sitting in the and this like the ending the end of this movie is something that is, I mean,
Yeah,
again, it's difficult to talk about without saying too much, but as a viewer, even you're not really sure 100% what happens, right?
no,
Because
and I mean to be honest with you, I think that was like a theme that Freakin had there for a while, where he really didn't want you to know exactly, what was happening.
same exact thing with the French Connection, right? So if anybody's
Yeah,
seen the French Connection, if you know the end of that movie where a character turns a corner but the camera doesn't follow him, and then you just hear a noise,
yeah.
and then it cuts to black, so you never really get to see what happens. That's like the sister scene in this movie. Like it's very similar to what happens in the French Connection.
And actually, cruising at the end of
Yeah,
cruising, where
yeah, yeah.
Pacino's looking in the mirror, and then he looks over, and he goes from like this one face to another kind of expression, and you're like, what the fuck is
Yeah, what's
but
that all about?
you don't know,
And then the guy,
same.
like what the shadow figure of the guy walking into the bar too, like just a person walking into the
Yeah,
bar. Like you're kind of like, it's something with the French Connection, with Cruising, and with this Sorcerer. All three of these movies have endings, regardless of. I mean, the entire movie is fantastic. It's amazing, but the endings of these movies are the types of endings that stick with you for days, and you just think about what did I see, and what happened there. And I think Friedkin is like one of the masters of filming and putting together something like that that's actually effective and works.
I think if there's people do not give him enough credit, but of like every director that I've seen come out of that time period, I think he had the most influence on guys like Tarantino and oh god, who's the other guy? Fincher, and people like that for making these endings to these movies where they weren't like Hollywood endings, where there
No,
was there was something that was not wasn't happy ending per se, or it was ambiguous and you didn't really know what happened, and like I wish that more people did that shit. I don't know where that went wrong. Maybe it was around the time all the summer blockbuster movies where everything was happy, but nowadays it seems like everybody has to have everything spelled out exactly like to them about what happened, and
yeah, they don't want to take the risk of upsetting people or like leaving them to make up their own assumptions in their head. Like everything has to be spelled out type thing. Like that doesn't. There's certain movies where that works, and there's certain movies where that doesn't work. And this is one where that wouldn't work if they spelled everything out. Like the movie's great, but there's just the way ambiguity of the final, really 15 seconds of the movie
yeah.
is what really kind of drives it home for you as to like, I can't believe what I'm seeing type thing.
There's a great scene too before that where Scheider's just sitting there, and he's drinking. He's having a drink or something and the camera goes into
Yes.
like a zoom, onto a close up.
Yeah. And you're sure that that's going to just cut to black right there.
Yeah,
You're
that's going to be
positive
the end of it.
as a viewer, you're kind of just like in your head, logically, you've seen movies. You kind of generally know how movies tend to go, and you're like, it's just going to cut to black because that would have been a great ending.
Yeah,
right?
that would
just kind of the camera. He's got his money, he's got his passport, and he's just kind of it's just a look on his face of shock and just kind of like, I can't believe what I just went through type deal. And it zooms in, but then it just lingers there for like a minute. And you're like, when's it going to cut? When are the credits going to roll? And it never does. And it continues to go on for another 3 minutes or so to where you get to the real end of the movie where things are very ambiguous without spoiling too much.
Yeah. And like I said, I really want people to see this. And a lot of people in this chat are talking about that they've never seen it or heard of it. And that's kind of what I would expect too, because I didn't really wasn't that familiar with it. I'd watched it one time, but I don't think I was in the movies like this. Like, you have to be in a kind of like certain mind frame because it's a very difficult movie to watch.
Yeah.
Especially the first hour of it. I mean, to get through. But the second half of it.
Yeah. Just, you were going to say that the second half, like, I wouldn't say that the first half is like hard to get through. But it
is if you're like Wes, where you don't want to read like subtitles.
You don't want to read. But like you were saying earlier, there's not a whole lot of dialogue in this movie, and you're really able to get the gist of what's happening even with the subtitles. Like, it's not anything super complicated that's going on where you need to, like, you're not reading a whole lot. It's just trying to get the characters out to you as the viewer and say, here's what this person did, here's why they have to flee the country. It's not some kind of a crazy idea, but the second half of the movie flies by because it's just so suspenseful and crazy. But
I didn't think about this, but you know what it kind of reminds me of? In the beginning of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, where they show each one of them and like what they're doing.
Yeah.
Before the movie starts, so it's like you got the Eli Wallach thing, and it's like the ugly, and then you got Clint Eastwood, and it's like the good, and it's just basically that's the same thing without them saying it. It's their own like little mini story, so you figure out like then they all come together later in the film.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is one thing I wanted to mention was the soundtrack. Obviously, the soundtrack.
Oh yeah, we didn't even talk about that. Yeah.
Tangerine Dream is like a group that I think that they have done more collaboration projects for soundtracks and TV and stuff. I think they have more of that than they ever did like studio solo stuff. Like, they are so but the soundtrack to this is great. I do know that they Tangerine Dream composed the soundtrack to this movie without ever having even seen even a single frame of the film because it wasn't finished yet. So they were given the script of the film and just in their imagination, they came up with this music, and holy shit, does it work. Like, it works really, really well. Like, the scene in the beginning when they're getting in the truck and they're turning the lights on and just like, it's just a shot of the front of the truck in the dark and all you see is the headlights turning on.
The lights come on one by one. Yeah.
The Tangerine Dream music of like those organs. It's like these very eerie, like creepy organs. You couldn't have picked a better.
The story that got me, and Friedkin tells it in one of those interviews that I watched, was like how he met them or came about them. So apparently, like in the mid 70s, he was on some sort of promotional tour in Germany for The Exorcist.
Yeah,
and he goes out to they're having a concert. I would kill somebody to be able to see something like this. So Tangerine Dream is having a concert in an abandoned church in the middle of like the Black Forest in Germany. And, I guess Friedkin happens to be there at the same time. He goes out and watches it and says they play for like 3 or 4 hours or something like that. I'm sure they're all high off their tits on acid. And everybody else is too. And so he walks up to the head guy or whoever the leader is, and he's like, I don't know what my next movie is going to be, but like when I do it, like I'm going to use you, to do the score. and that was his next movie. And it's like he wrote him a letter. He's like, "Hey, I don't know if you remember this or not, but
Yeah, you
yada
got some
yada
time
yada."
to set aside in the studio. Can you please record some music and I'll use it in
Yeah.
my movie? Like, and just the fact that they, most that would never happen today. If you're going to compose music for a movie, you're going to have the movie at your disposal to work the music around the movie. In this case, they just made music, period,
Yeah.
and just said like, "Here's the music," and then it matches up with the feeling of the movie really, really well.
Yeah, it's hard to explain, but it doesn't sound like any other soundtrack. Like it's synth pop. It's not pop, but it's synth.
There's parts
But
of it that are like synthy,
Yeah.
but at the same time, like that scene, that's not the only scene where it's like this, but like I said, the scene with the headlights turning on and stuff, that's not even like synth or ambient or progressive. It's just straight up like organ music, just classical, I guess you could say, classical music, just this really eerie, creepy organ music. There's an album. I don't know if are you familiar with Keith Jarrett, the jazz musician Keith Jarrett?
No.
Okay, so he's got a ton of albums and records and stuff out, but he's got an album called Hymns and oh god, I'm totally blanking on the name of it right now. I need to tell you the name of it because if you are a fan of like those creepy organ parts in this movie,
somebody in the chat would already know it.
It's Hymns and Spheres. So there's an album by Keith Jarrett. It's from, I believe it came out in the 70s. It's called Hymns and Spheres. And Keith Jarrett was a famous jazz pianist. So he recorded this album. I believe it's completely improvised. And all it is him in a cathedral using their organ and just improvising these organ parts, and came out with this like album. It's like a double LP. It's phenomenal. Like it's very hypnotic and it's just something you kind of just want to sit back and just like take in what you're hearing. Very similar to the Tangerine Dream stuff that you'll hear in those scenes of this movie where it's just that creepy, ominous kind of organ music. But if anybody hasn't heard of that album by Keith Jarrett, Hymns and Spheres, it's really, really good. I don't know if it's on YouTube or what, but I have it on vinyl because I got like a used copy at a record store. But I highly recommend if you like just straight up no vocals or any other instruments other than just an organ. It's really, really good, and it reminded me when I watched this of the Tangerine Dream music.
And I feel like that Friedkin was really into that style of music, because Tubular Bells and that, that.
Yeah, right.
Whatever that style of music is exactly, like he seemed really into that at that
Yeah,
period.
so that's cool that Tangerine Dream did this. So that's just another plus of the many like pluses that this movie already has. Like, if nothing convinces you, if anything that we haven't said hasn't convinced you to watch this movie already, like God, like I don't know what will. It's like
I said earlier though, like the last hour of this movie is in my top 5. Like, I don't know what you'd say. Like, I wouldn't say that this is in my top 5 films, or maybe I would at this point. I don't fucking know, but definitely the last hour of this movie is like in the top 5 hours of any movie that you'll ever see.
Agree.
In my opinion.
And I think as a whole, like I wouldn't say that it's like a tough movie to watch. Maybe for the first hour, like you said, it's a little bit like you kind of have to get past the fact that there's subtitles, and it's just, you have to get through that build up of the characters to get to the real like climax of the movie where it just is nonstop craziness and intensity. But overall at the end of it, I think it's a movie to me where like immediately after watching it, I was certain that this was like one of the greatest movies that I would probably ever see in my life. Like, and it's a movie that makes you feel so glad that we have movies to watch.
Yeah, it's also a movie
that art.
It's a movie that's like lost in time because, you got to think about how many movies I've seen past, 1977, and I would say 99% of them don't compare to this movie. So you're not going to see another movie like this. They're not ever going to make a movie like this again. Like nobody's going to do practical, effects in a jungle somewhere where they put people's lives at risk, and that's just shit is just not going to ever happen again. And
No.
especially for the fact that it's so much cheaper just to do something on like CGI on a soundstage or something somewhere, which is how they make all these movies. And I
No,
just recently, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to just say, like, I haven't seen. I know that this was kind of a pseudo remake ish of the film The Wages of Fear,
Yeah,
which is like a French film from the 50s, which is in a similar. It has a similar concept. It's like very similar, but not exactly the same. I haven't seen that movie yet. I know that it's also it's like another like 2.5 hour long movie. It's completely in French, so that one is totally subtitled. I've heard very good things about it.
me too.
I don't doubt that it's good, but it feels like since it's in French and it's a little bit older, a little bit of a different style, I might need to be in a certain mindset to sit down and watch that. But I know that obviously was kind of the groundwork for this movie to be made.
Yeah, and then maybe eventually I'll get to that. I can't imagine that it will be as good as this. Like
I don't think so. Yeah.
There are a few things that I can imagine being as good as this movie, but so the legacy of this movie is that it shit the bed basically. I mean that's the initial legacy of the movie.
It
It's
take half the budget back.
It's Friedkin's follow up to The Exorcist, which is an impossible movie to follow anyway. According to him, he was kind of out of his mind with arrogance at that point because he thought, the first two big movies that he had made, both were blockbusters. So he thought, I can do no wrong. This is going to be my masterpiece. And it comes out and it's so, it's so against.
It's a failure.
Yeah, it's because it's totally against what Star Wars and that kind of, movement, what that kind of movement was that was going on, that I think most people just kind of dismissed it as being this overly kind of blown up, kind of slow burn kind of movie, and didn't really think anything of it at that time. Thought it was his biggest kind of failure and mistake and all this. And,
well, I think that's what people thought, but I guess
at the time,
really, yeah. Now people don't think that now because I think as people have seen it over the years, they've realized what they missed out on.
Yeah,
because it's so good. But I believe even William Friedkin said that. I think he's quoted to say that this was like his best movie that he's ever made, or at least it's the movie that turned out like exactly the way that he wanted to.
It is his best movie. It just is. Like, I mean, I guess could make an argument if you wanted to that The Exorcist or something was, depending on who you are, it was a better movie.
Which is, you can't really argue. I mean, Exorcist is The Exorcist, right? But this is,
I've seen The Exorcist a million times, and I've seen this movie, and this movie's better. It just is. It is. I don't know how to explain it exactly, other than to say that like it really is like his masterpiece. Like everything comes together in this movie. I don't really even if you had like Pauly Shore in every role in this movie, it would still work. Like it's not even about the actors in the movie. It's just about like the set, everything that happens in the movie is just
and like it was just such a shame that it came out at the same time as Star Wars. But you know what? I almost think that the Star Wars excuse is a little bit overblown because Star Wars came out and it was, the big movie of the year and all that. But I think even if Star Wars hadn't come out, would this have been a success if Star Wars hadn't come out? Probably. Like it didn't seem like it would have either because the movie.
It seemed you're right. It's kind of destined for failure, wasn't it? I mean,
because the movie, I guess they had according to IMDb, they had a $21 million budget, Sorcerer, and it made $9 million.
Yeah,
it was a failure, a complete failure.
I mean, we're talking about back then. That sounds like nothing now because movies make like $1 billion. But like back then, if you lost half of your budget, I mean, you were ostracized basically. Like you were just that didn't happen. Like you just did not do that.
I I
But
think because this movie was such a failure, I think that kind of had a negative impact on Friedkin's like professional career in a little bit of a way, because I think studios were a little bit hesitant after that. From what I was reading about the movie, I think that he kind of lost a little bit of his directorial powers because this was such a financial failure, that studios weren't as willing to kind of let him do just what he wanted, like with a movie like that. And that's such a shame because, well, he had Cruising come out, which was probably his next like best.
I was getting ready to say though. So what does he do? Like after the failure of Sorcerer, he immediately starts working on Cruising, which if it could be is a more un-PC, unlike, so the logical thing, the logical thing to have done would be to like lick your wounds and go like make, like a comic book movie or something at that point, just something that would be a success. He makes like the most unfriendly movie to audiences that you could make.
Just totally mean-spirited, like X-rated, borderline X-rated, like slasher movie, giallo, basically.
Yeah, just I don't know.
I'm a huge fan of that movie, also.
I am too. The guy's got like balls of solid steel. Like there's nobody would even do anything like that. Like not even really then, like I was saying. But that the legacy of the movie up until I'd say probably about 10 years ago was that it was just like a flop amongst all these like wonderful big successes that he had. Then people really started to reevaluate the movie, and then it became pretty clear that it's like one of the modern kind of masterpieces of that time period.
It's a movie that I honestly I just can't fathom, and I don't want to sound like, I don't know, pretentious or whatever. I just can't. I could not envision somebody not enjoying this movie, watching it. Like I couldn't having a reaction to the movie.
I'm positive though that there are people that will not enjoy this movie, and it has to be a certain mindset, right? Like because, I mean, if there's a ton of people that love, a certain type of high energy, optimistic style movie that they're not gonna get into this movie. But I kind of agree with you. Like if you even just like cinema, like I don't know how you could not watch the last hour of this movie at least and be like, holy shit, this is amazing.
Yeah. And I honestly think like it's mind blowing on a first watch. Like it's a really, really great movie, but I think that it's a movie that deserves and you will benefit from watching it a second time, like a couple of weeks or months down, like maybe a month later. That's what I did. Like I kind of watched it the first time and was like, okay, let me just take in what I saw. And then a couple of months later, I watched it again and I was able to really focus on it in a different way. And this is one of those movies where you will benefit, I think, from watching it a second time later, because the impact of it is even heavier the second time around, because you're able to not have to focus on everything being new for the first time again. So you kind of expect a couple of things, but then you're able to analyze it in a little bit of a different way the second time around.
So, give you an idea though, Stephen King lists it as like his number one movie rental of all time.
Oh wow. Yeah, well,
Roger Ebert says that it's his ninth of 10 films made in 1977. It's his ninth favorite. That guy's such a piece of shit, or was such a piece of shit. Tarantino says that it's one of his personal top 10 films. I mean, that's kind of the company that it's in. So I want to tell you how you can get this movie if you want to watch it. If you go on Amazon right now, you can buy the Blu-ray of it for like $12. It's like 40% off or something like that right now. It's 12 something. It has a digibook that's been out of print for a long time. That goes for like $40 or $50 on eBay. I looked it up. you can get that version of it, which is the same version as the Blu-ray that is $12, but it just has like a couple of booklets and letters and things like that in it about the movie.
Now, did you read about some kind of a controversy that happened with the Blu-ray release of this movie? Was that with this movie or was that with The French Connection, where William Friedkin wrote an Amazon review on one of the listings that says, this is not the version of the movie that I approved.
I think
Don't buy this.
I think that was The French Connection.
Okay,
I really do.
Yeah, because it's on Amazon. Yeah. You can see it. It's on Amazon. It says W. Friedkin at the bottom.
Maybe I'm wrong, but I swear to God, it seems like I remember him talking something about that.
It's either this or The French Connection, but yeah, I don't own the Blu-ray for this movie. I'll have to look into that Amazon listing and see, because I think there were one or two different Blu-rays that were released. One was in the States, and I think the other one was overseas. But like you were talking about earlier, I think that while William Friedkin is still around, because he's getting up there in age, he's in his mid to late 80s now. And he's always been very involved in the releases of his movies too, with the physical formats of them. So I think that it's inevitable that we'll get a 4K of The Exorcist and of this.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Like I said, if there's ever any movie, this will be on my top 2 or 3 that I want to see in 4K. I just feel like that it would be the scenery and the cinematography would be amazing to see in 4K.
I agree.
But you're right, and I think somebody mentioned this earlier too. Kino is working on another version of To Live and Die in L.A. in 4K. That'll probably be out soon too. This one will probably be out soon, and The Exorcist will definitely be out before any of them, I'd say.
I hope, yeah.
But let's go through a couple of comments here. If I can get past these fucking sperm bots.
Yeah, right. I had a little bit of an Easter egg in the background. I don't know if anybody noticed. But I picked up the soundtrack to Live and Die in LA.
Yeah. Wang Chung, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Some Wang on the turntable.
That is an amazing soundtrack as well.
It's so good, yeah. So that, in spirit of the last weekend at Friedkin's, I just kind of checked this out. It was $12. So check out Discogs if you want a copy of this. It's so good. Just like the Tangerine Dream soundtrack. This, though, is obviously a very 80s kind of drum beat type of upbeat type stuff, but super, super good.
So that's awesome though that you got that. Where in the hell did you get that at?
The soundtrack, I got it on Discogs. So there's a couple different pressings of it available, but the one of the US pressings, which is that one, just look on there, and there's sellers on there that have them, and they're you can get it for under $20 easily on there. So just check around and check out if it says that it's in very good plus condition or near mint or whatever. You always got to check on that on Discogs because it's mostly used copies. But that was $13 shipped from one of the sellers that I got it from on there. So super worth it though.
That's awesome. So Fan Eli though says he's never heard of the movie. You will definitely check it out. I believe that you should.
Yeah, I think that's the whole point of this, is I hope people check this movie out. If you haven't ever seen it, put it at the top of your list because it's worth it.
X-Ray Punch has got 500 comments right in a row here, so I'm trying to... But I do appreciate that, though, too. I think this is the first movie Tangerine Dream scored. The end theme was used for The Warriors, yep. And he says Sorcerer was the height of his directorial powers. I think that's true, really. I think he doesn't really make a comeback. So after Sorcerer, by the way, he goes off and he does Cruising, right? Which is a fantastic fucking movie.
Really, really, really good movie. Horror film.
Then he he makes a deal of the century with Chevy Chase, which is
I've never seen that.
Horrible comedy. Is that the one with Chevy Chase? I think that's the one with Chevy Chase. Deal of the century, yeah. And
did the Brinks job.
Did the Brinks job. He come in '85. He does Live and Die in L.A., which I think is an amazing film too.
Yeah, yeah.
And then he does like I haven't seen Rampage, but I hear that it's like a fairly decent movie. It's got Michael Biehn in it, but nobody really has seen it because you can't find it anywhere.
No.
The Guardian, which I loved when I was a kid, I have to go back and watch it again. It's like a horror story, Grimm's fairy tale kind of thing about a tree woman that tries to attack a baby, something like that.
Yeah, I think I've seen the trailer for that. Haven't seen the movie though.
And what I would like to do, I'm thinking of this is what I'm going to do. So for the next one of these, next Saturday at 10, I'm going to do The Guardian and probably Bug. So it'll be like the horror section kind of thing. So by no means are either one of those movies as good as this movie or the last two movies. But
I think I'll have to check out. I mean, I haven't seen either of those, to be totally honest with you. I've heard more about Bug than I have of The Guardian. So if I can, I'll try to watch both of them just to know what you're talking about whenever you do that stream. But I don't own either of them, and I haven't seen them.
They're bound to be amazing, though. I mean, I remember both of them. I remember The Guardian more because I watched it more when I was a kid. But Bug, I just saw maybe once at the theater. And I was so pissed off because, like I said, the advertising campaign for that movie made it seem like it was, like fucking Squirm or something like that. Like, that's the way they tried to sell it. And that movie is like more like a descent into psychosis. Like, it doesn't have anything really to do. It's like, I don't know. I'm looking forward to going back and watching it after, like, all these years. Movie Junkie John says, to me, Friedkin just seems fearless. Absolutely fearless. It's weird how much his legacy has been hidden. That's true. And I think both those points are true. I don't think he gave a shit at all, especially in the 70s, early 80s about.
No. And like he says that we've made him a Friedkin fan, which is like, that, hey, I'm happy about that because, like, listen, dude, there are a handful of videos on YouTube where William Friedkin is just giving like speeches and kind of I don't know what, I'm blanking on the term of these, like, kind of he's like speaking at colleges and like film schools and stuff like that, and they're full interviews. They're like some of them are like an hour and a half, 2 hours long, and it's just listening to him talk about movies, his movies, other movies, movie making in general. If you can go on, just search those up on YouTube and just put them on while you're, like, I don't know, laying down to go to sleep or something like that, and just listen to this dude talk.
Yeah.
It's just, he's never boring. He's got a wealth of knowledge and stories and just badassery in his dialogue. Like, he doesn't give a shit about anything. Like, he tells it how it is, how he wants it to be, how it happened. I really would like to buy his book because I don't have it. And I think that would be a really great read. But I have gone through those videos on YouTube and did like kind of a binge for like a week. I was just watching and listening to William Friedkin talk during work and stuff. So. And
I think that my favorite one is the one with that Nicholas, the guy that directed Drive. There's actually a couple of them on there where it's Friedkin gets interviewed by the Nicholas blah, blah, blah guy that directed Drive and a bunch of other movies. And it's two of the funniest interviews you'll ever see because they just give each other shit like throughout the entire interview. Like, they're talking about stuff, but they're also busting each other's balls like throughout the whole interview too.
Right. And I think there's a recent, I can't remember the dude's name.
He's still doing them. He's still doing last couple months.
Somebody in the last roundtable or whatever it was said that he had an interview that was just like I don't know, like a year old or something on a podcast with the guy who wrote American Psycho.
Yeah.
And I guess it's like a long, like 2 hour. I don't know how long it is. I thought it was like 2 hours, but to listen to that podcast, you have to like pay for it. So it's like a Patreon thing. So I think I might just pay that guy to listen to that one podcast, and just because I want to hear that. I want to hear more of William Friedkin talking about stuff.
Me too. Me too. But okay, so I wanted to point everybody's attention over to Garrett at Born to Be Rad, who is going live right now.
Oh, shit!
For a up all night Q&A kind of thing, ask me anything kind of deal. So
Very
anybody
cool.
that's over here that wants to head over that way, I mean, we've talked about the Sorcerer for fucking 2 hours now.
Yeah,
I think
dude,
that's about as good as anybody can do with this movie.
That's perfect, because that's the length of the movie. So I think we did our due diligence.
Yeah, I think we did. So big thanks again to you, Matt, for coming and like helping me out with this. I really appreciate that. As always, it's great to have you on here. Big thanks to everybody for coming out to the chat. But it's time to take your asses over to Born to Be Rad now. Check his ass out. But next Saturday, try to find somebody that'll do Bug and The Guardian. That's a hard sell. Those two movies are a hard sell to try to find somebody to do that with. But I'll try.
Yeah. I haven't seen them, so I can't really. I don't think I'd be the candidate for that. But hopefully, you can get someone that might be a fan of those.
Yeah.
You know.
And yeah, I would love to meet the person that's actually like a big fan of both those movies too. But a week after that, on the Saturday after that, will be CK and I will be doing Blue Chips and The Exorcist. That'll be the finale of Weekend at Freakin'. So I hope that everybody is enjoying this, and if you're not, I really don't give that much of a shit. I'm enjoying it, and that's really the main thing. So hopefully we'll see you back next Saturday. Thanks again, guys, and go check us out on DeadPit, Patreon, shop DeadPit, do some shit on Instagram. Go over to Garrett's shit right now, Born to Be Rad. He's going to be doing something. And I and Matt are out.
Give us the thumbs up.
Up you butt.
Like, subscribe. And if you subscribe, here's something else you can do. Once you subscribe, you can click the bell notification.
Oh, shit. I fucking came back up. I was trying to click off the comment. Sorry, I really am gone this time.
Give us the thumbs up.
Up you butt.
Like, subscribe. And if you subscribe, here's something else you can do. Once you subscribe, you can click the bell notification, right? And it'll notify you anytime that DeadPit puts up new shit.
Or don't. I really don't give a if you do or
I
not.
want you to. I want you to.
I don't care.
Let's keep our community growing here on YouTube.
I don't like it. I don't want you to touch nothing.
Listen, they need to do that, pal.
No, don't you dare touch it.
Thumbs up. Subscribe. And click that bell.
For this video officially, it's Old Curly Jaws has a message for you. Go on over to shop.deadpit.com and go look at their Teen Public store right now. You've got some new shirts like the Old Curly Jaws official t-shirt, which is brutal and badass. You got the Yummy Gummy shirt with the captain himself on the shirt. You got Uncle Bill's face on a fucking shirt. You got the Final Girl shirt. You got all these shirts over at shop.deadpit.com. Get them before they're all out, especially the new one, Bedtime 1039. It doesn't get better than that, so go on out. Check out these shirts at shop.deadpit.com. Go look at their Teen Public store. You're going to have a good old time. Get them all!
Thank you to all of our supporters on Patreon. DeadPit on Patreon.com is the only place to check out a complete archive of the old DeadPit radio shows all the way back from 2005 on, in addition to the midweek shows and fan commentaries, exclusive podcasts, and much more. DeadPit on Patreon.com if you're interested. Tiers start at only $1.